Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me a candidate who is running for the mayor of Evanston. His name is Sebastian Nalls. Welcome, Sebastian. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I had interviewed your opponent, Daniel Biss, and I had asked Biss, I said, well, who else is running? And he said, a man named Sebastian Nalls. I was like, who is Sebastian Nalls? And I looked you up and I said, oh, okay, I got to talk to this man right now. So Sebastian, tell us who you are. Who are you, Sebastian? Who are you?
No, definitely. So I've been a resident of Evanston for almost my entire life. My family moved from Chicago's Uptown neighborhood when I was 1, and I've been in the 9th Ward ever since. I went to elementary school at Pope John the 23rd, which is right off of Washington Asbury, Washington Ridge. And I spent my high school years at Evanston Township High School. I graduated in 2018 and have gone on to study at Purdue University in Indiana, majoring in both accounting and political science. I've worked in the Evanston Parks and Recreation Department for some time, usually in their summer programs, a little bit in the winter programs, but obviously I had high school going on, so I wasn't too involved in that. And as well as that, I am currently employed as an undergraduate manager for Purdue men's basketball team.
Wow, okay. So what made you decide to run for, I mean, you went for it, you went for mayor. What made you decide to run for mayor of Evanston?
Definitely some of the social changes that are taking place in Evanston. One of the main pushing factors that I had was about 2 years ago with some of the issues that were going on with Robert Brown relating to funding. And I had been at Robert Brown for many years, whether it was preschool or summer camps when I was younger. So the community center means a lot to me. I've grown up around that neighborhood. I made some really good friends there. And especially when it came to that $400,000 donation that was given to take away the primetime slot from 4 to 7 for the fall and winter months. And I thought to myself, I was like, you know, who's going to be most impacted by this? And this is going to be minority youth that live in the neighborhood and that use these facilities heavily, and especially since they're newly renovated as well. And I thought that was a really unjust thing for the city to do. And it kind of kick-started this fire within me. And I started to do some more research, and especially when it came to some of the protests regarding George Floyd's death earlier in the summer, and some of the reactions by the current administration. And I felt that Evanston is not safe from racism. There's racism that exists in Evanston, whether it's systemic or individual. And we need to make an effort to make those changes overall.
Yes, yes. Now I had asked you, I know some people don't think that, you know, you should ask people what their ethnicity is, but, and you can't assume. And I had asked you, and you were like proud to say, you know, I'm bicultural, I'm Black and Polish. So for you, attacking social justice, how is that for you, being on both sides? Because you bring 2 different perspectives to it.
No, definitely. I mean, it's such an important factor to me, because I've seen racism my entire life, and I come from a unique perspective where sometimes growing up, I would not be seen as being 100% Black because of being biracial, but at the same time, I'm not seen as white because of the color of my skin. And so I was in this interesting middle ground, and I learned how to navigate that. And I learned how to learn more about each culture, each different, whether it's my Polish side or my African American side. And I've definitely noticed a change over the years from growing up. when I was younger, we would have to dress nicely because it was the stigma and that biracial families were poor, they were less educated overall. So I always had to exemplify myself as my best self, and I've taken that to the next level. And like I said earlier, it's gotten better overall, but there's still work to be done, and especially with the Black community as well in Evanston. And the role of mayor is kind of an interesting one because there are often misconceptions about it overall. Because the official duties of mayor are often pretty narrow in scope. They have veto powers, small amount of voting powers in certain circumstances. You know, you can sign ordinances, resolutions, things like that. But the mayor's function outside of these tasks are whatever the individual in office would like it to be. And I personally see the mayor as being an advocate for all, listening to the concerns of the community. And I've already committed to holding weekly or monthly town hall meetings where members of the community can have a direct line of communication with a local official, who would be me, and then I can relay those concerns directly to the city council. And the job of mayor is deemed a part-time job, but it's ultimately, you know, it's a full-time commitment. Evanston is a large population of 75,000 residents, a lot of hardworking and caring individuals here. And I'm young, I have no obligations to any outside influences, and I'm more than ready to take on the job of being an active, community-oriented mayor.
Okay, now you have brought up Robert Crown being a driving force to you wanting to become mayor, and how that was handled, the money, how the budget, how all of that was handled. So if you were to become mayor tomorrow, and I mean, they have different developments on the table already. So these things are up for discussion prior to you coming into office. Now you're in office and you're saying, well, we're still in COVID-19 right now. And there are businesses still shutting down. People don't know what their employment status is going into 2021 because of COVID. People are losing their homes, people being evicted. So what would your conversation be at a council meeting? You know, if they're talking about, well, let's build a new civic center, or let's go build Robert Crown #2, or, you know, because it's development deals that are out there, but we're in such a weird time right now. A lot of people feel, well, that shouldn't even be up for discussion. Those should just totally be put on the back burner. And everybody in Evanston that's hurting should be receiving help.
Yes, of course. No, that's a great question. And I understand completely both sides of the argument. On one hand, you can't completely off-put any or all city projects that are taking place. Roads need to be done. Some buildings do need to be repaired overall. I know the Civic Center has had some issues with construction recently. And so those are obviously of concern. And the residents and the suffering that has come from COVID-19 is also a huge concern in the community. So I believe it's okay to have these discussions, but they need to be on a small scale and more on a committee scale more than an entire city council scale. So if we designate a committee to look at, okay, how much would it cost to renovate the Civic Center? Or how much would it cost to redo Chandler Newberger in North Evanston? Those are okay conversations to have. But in the end of the day, it's the residents that come first, and we need to prioritize them and any suffering that is going on, or any inequalities that are happening in the community. And I think we need to especially look at spending on a department level and as the city as a whole, because unnecessary spending happens in a bureaucracy. There's no question about it. But we need to make moves to limit that as much as we can so we can have more funds available for projects that will improve the community and help out residents. So you brought up Robert Crown, and I think we should take that as a lesson that everything has a price tag and that we cannot just spend money left and right. And that's, I've always gotten the question, you know, why are you majoring in accounting and political science? Those are pretty opposite or not correlating majors. And most people who go into political science end up going into economics. But I believe that accounting is a very practical and applicable form of, whether it's taxation, looking at finance, looking at budgeting, because accounting encompasses all of those things. So if you have an understanding on spending and how to pay for things, then it will guide you to make better overall decisions. Because the Robert Crown Center was grossly overpaid for, and the budget was expanded multiple times throughout its construction. So we need to look at it as public servants and be, okay, we have this vision of what we want to accomplish, and we have a given budget. We can't just be throwing out money that we don't have and letting other generations ultimately deal with it, because it'll be my generation and my children and my children's children that will now have to bear the burden of some of these debts that the city owes. And I was a treasurer for an organization back on campus, and that's where I learned the importance of not allowing every single project to necessarily take place. And we had a fund of about $35,000, which is extremely small in comparison to the city budget, obviously. But we would get proposals from students that would want to go on a trip, create some event, host, you know, a concert, and we would often have to tell them no, because in the end of the day, we need to make sure this money lasts, and we need to make sure that the money is used to positively impact each individual on campus who's affiliated with the organization. So at the end of the day, we're obviously going to need to pay for things. And if we cannot pay for them, we cannot build them. It's simple as that. And we have to have a concrete plan laid out over whether it's a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan of how we're adequately going to pay for something. But ultimately, it comes down to the residents. If residents are suffering and there's inequality in neighborhoods, we need to address those issues first. And oftentimes, it's that if we develop communities further, if we solve racial inequality, our economy will receive a boost. So I looked at the Citigroup report that came out about a week ago that said that the United States has lost an estimated $20 trillion to racism over the history of the United States. And that just like baffles me, because how much has Evanston itself lost out on that as well? How many Black businesses were prohibited from being built because of racism and systemic racism in Evanston? So we need to sit down as a community, as a city council, as a local government, and have these conversations, because in the end of the day, the residents are the most important part of the city. If there are no residents in Evanston, there is no city. So we need to make sure that everyone has a fair and equitable chance to have a great life here in Evanston.
Yes, I remember Good to Go, Jamaican restaurant on Howard Street. They met some challenges, and many believe that it was racism behind it. So just imagine if the racism had won, we wouldn't have this great Jamaican restaurant, but they stayed true, they were strategic, and they got through it. But yeah, I do remember hearing those stories of certain people trying to block them from opening up on the other side of Howard Street, the Evanston side. Okay, and we definitely have to tackle police reform. As I was sharing with this, of course, our situation isn't nearly as bad as it is in other cities. as far as police brutality, but the racism does exist here. Absolutely, in our police department. And I believe the Black police officers are having their experiences with some of the white police officers, like in-house. They're going through their own, challenges. And then that definitely, comes out on more so our young Black men in Evanston, from some of the races. And so what are your thoughts on cleaning house? I definitely believe there needs to be longer training. Like, police officers are not trained nearly long enough.
Yes. Background
checks clearly are not thorough enough. They should be able to tell if a white police officer is a Proud Boy, or is affiliated with any of those types of groups. I don't think the background checks are going deep enough, and we need to clean house. We need to clean house. What are your thoughts on that, and how would we go about cleaning house?
Yeah, I believe that police in America and in Evanston have a broad role in the everyday lives of citizens, but it's often too broad in the end of the day. They receive, like you said, limited training and are not always given the tools to respond properly to certain situations. If you graduate high school, you have a high school diploma, you go into the police force, you go your 6 months in the police academy, and you have a call about somebody that has a mental illness and is having problems, you may not know how to respond adequately to that situation, which has been the case in multiple cities across the US where things have spiraled out of control and individuals have been shot and killed. So we need to make sure that police have the training that they need. And people often think of reducing funds to police departments as being a negative thing. Like, how can you possibly train police officers if you're taking funds away from them? But by reducing funds to the Evanston Police Department in a safe and manageable way, we're obviously not going to be one day like, oh, hey, 50% of the police department is now gone. That's not going to solve anything. And if anything, that'll cause more problems and more pushback. We want this to be a collaborative effort between the police department, the city council, and the people of Evanston. So if we reduce funds to the Evanston Police Department, we can reinvest those tax dollars into what we call in our campaign as crime preventative initiatives. So this includes putting more money into the Parks and Recreation Department to create programs that benefit youth and give them a way to channel their energy in a creative and healthy manner, and as well as expanding preschool programs to increase accessibility for low and middle income families. And there's been numerous studies that have shown that if a child is coming into kindergarten and elementary school ready, that they are more successful throughout their education experience. They're more likely to go to college, and they're more likely to stay away from crime. So on our website, we talk about our Raising a Child Together initiative, which would aim to prepare children for elementary school and beyond. So another thing that we were thinking about doing was pumping more money and investing into community development department, that is currently department in Evanston. And then that they would be tasked with reinvesting into our neighborhoods. So we can provide more economic opportunities for residents, which will again lower crime, because if there are more economic opportunities, especially in areas that suffer from a lack of economic opportunities, crime will naturally go down. And we can also increase funds to the Health and Human Services Department, which would allow for greater health access for residents who suffer from asthma, diabetes, and other illnesses such as heart disease. And so all of these increases in funding will reduce crime overall. But it's not the only thing we need to do by a stretch. There needs to be actual police reform. If you do these other things, but you leave out police reform, you still have that systemic issue of policing, right? So the police department itself will need to see reform so that each officer has the tools needed to succeed in community policing. So we will try to have officers having a complete education, whether that's an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, either in criminology, psychology, or sociology, and on top of whatever training they receive when going to the police academy. And also having specialists in the department that can accompany officers to calls in order to mediate a situation and even take over a situation, need be, if the situation is safe, will allow the department itself to focus on solving crimes in the community and being engaged in a positive manner. So the two-pronged initiative, which we like to call, will ultimately reduce crime and improve community interactions with police. And I certainly look forward to working with the City Council to create concrete legislation that makes Evanston a safer and more equitable city overall.
Mm, mm. Now, you know, I'm sure you've had this conversation. People are like, okay, he's 20 years old, you know, but you know, what I've seen from the younger generation is you all are so proactive and you have these movements. Like you see something's wrong in society, you all are on it. Let's change it now. And you don't just sit around and have group discussions about it. You know, you all actually have discussions and take action. The discussion is a plan and you take action. So many believe that works in your favor because, you know, you're out there, you're active, you see the changes that need to take place, and that's all that matters. So with Evanston, you've pretty much been here all your life, 19 years, 20. That's going to matter to a lot of people, trust me. Like, was he born here? How long has he been here? You know, which is crazy to me. If you care about the city you live in, you care about the city you live in. It doesn't matter how long you've been here. But what do you mainly want to see change? What do you want to build upon? And what will you bring to the table that we haven't seen here in Evanston that you know will just be a great plan?
No, definitely. So one of the forefront ideas of our campaign is racial justice. And Evanston, like every other city or town across the United States, has participated in systemic racism at one point or another. I've talked to plenty of residents that still live here today that remember being redlined in the certain wards and not being able to even afford beach tokens because of how inaccessible they are for minority residents. And the Black community has been aware of these systemic injustices for decades and has actively been combating these issues. There's been plenty of organizations over the years that have been working to solve these problems. But it's ultimately the increasing use of social media that has brought these issues to the forefront of everyone's daily lives. And I attribute that to members of my generation who have stepped up and dedicated their time, their energy to bringing these issues to light. And there are plenty of my former peers from Evanston Township High School who have been working tirelessly to fight for the rights of marginalized groups here in Evanston, and I'm ready to do the same thing. And our campaign is looking to be better than or bigger than me individually. It's a movement to fight for equality in Evanston for generations to come. So looking at those investments via the Community Development Department to combat gentrification in Evanston, I know that gentrification was even a topic that was talked about in last election cycle in 2017. There was a debate that was solely focused on housing and gentrification, but yet these issues are still a major part in Evanston, especially in the 2nd and 5th Ward. So taking action on those issues to make sure that we aren't pushing out residents who have been here for 30, 40, 60 years, who they want to live here, but they're getting pushed out via gentrification. We mentioned beach tokens earlier. We wanna remove beach tokens because frankly, they're a socioeconomic barrier to entry for a lot of people who are low income and minority members of the community. I know myself as a college student, I don't make that much money, and I don't buy beach tokens just because I don't have $50 to spend on beach tokens every summer. And I'm blessed that some years my family gets beach tokens and I can borrow them, but you know, not everyone is in the position to acquire such a thing, to access a resource that should ultimately be available for every single resident who is a taxpayer. Because if you pay taxes, you should be able to use every single city resource that is available to you. So it's also a public safety issue. I believe that there were 1 or 2 individuals who sadly lost their lives going to Lake Michigan at night without any lifeguards. And my condolences to their families. It's terrible that these things happen. And the Parks and Recreation Department did a great job of staffing the beaches after hours with community members and making sure that individuals weren't going in the water. So it's a race issue, it's a socioeconomic issue, and it's a safety issue.
Sebastian, let me ask you a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many of us recognize the beach token. I mean, there's a lot of things that say, okay, that's racist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have a couple aldermen who many believe operate from bias and racism. It was alleged that one of the aldermen said the reason for the beach tokens was to keep a certain element out, to keep prostitution out. I was like, when was the last time you saw a prostitute walking down the beach in Evanston? Like, when has that ever happened?
Yeah.
You know, but that was the reasoning for implementing, we have to have beach tokens. We have to make people pay because it keeps an element out. So as mayor, how would you handle an alderman that would bring that sort of conversation?
No, definitely. I mean, I've had these conversations already while going door to door. This has been a question that's come up time and time again, where, you know, residents are asking, well, I don't want people from Chicago coming in and flooding the beach and then it's overcrowded. Well, then why don't we set up a system where residents can apply for a free beach token and then they can go to the beach whenever they want to. These beach tokens can be obtained at any community center, at the civic center. You can apply for it online and you can get it mailed to you, etc. There's a system that can be put in place, and then non-residents can then pay to get into the beaches. But it's just this argument that we want to keep out a certain element by putting a price to it. That's very dangerously walking the line of, you know, similar to statements that have been made in the past with regards of like redlining, especially. Oh, we want to keep a certain element out of our neighborhoods. Therefore, we're gonna make this area exclusively for, you know, or we're gonna push people into this neighborhood because we don't want that crime element, that drug element. And it's frankly making an excuse. We have resources here in Evanston that are readily available to be used, and we can use them to improve the community, improve equality over Evanston. But it's a matter of actually doing it, not just discussing it, because Evanston is very famed for discussing a lot of things, but then not really implementing it and putting our money where the mouth is. So we need to have real conversations about it and then look and say, look, we have a solution. We can make beach tokens free. You can go pick it up whenever you want to, bring it to the beach. Outside residents or residents from other communities have to pay to get in, and we just have to allocate funding from other resources to cover for the lifeguard expense. And then in the end of the day, it works out for everyone. but that requires effort to actually sit down and create such a program like that. And that's the job of mayor, is to sit down with all the aldermen and be like, look, this is an issue that we're facing. We need to get our stuff together, and we need to come together and compromise and fix the issue, because we can't let things go unchecked in Evanston. That's how we have situations such as, you know, still very red or very much segregated communities in Evanston. This should have been an issue that was addressed years ago. It's not like Evanston has been this, you know, racist place for the past, you know, 20, 30 years. We've had opportunities all the way from dating back to 2000 to fix some of these issues. And that's why I think a lot of people in my generation are finally rising up and saying, okay, enough is enough. We're not letting this go anymore. We need to take action. And there's so many other attributing facts to it, but these issues in Evanston need to be addressed, and we need to have concrete solutions to the problem. And once I get onto the ballot in November, I have every opportunity and every opportunity to go and create compound legislation that we can take to the city council and be like, look, we have this all drawn up, ready to go. We have a beach token program that we have the numbers for. It works within our budget. It's not going to cost us any more money, or won't cost us much more money than we already spend. Let's implement this. Let's discuss it. Let's create a comprehensive plan together. Let's compromise on some issues, and then we can get this stuff done.
Okay. All right. And so I didn't let you finish the other questions. Your what do you want to bring as Sebastian Nalls to the table that we haven't seen? An idea, a concept, a plan, and what do you want to build upon that Evanston is doing wonderful at?
Yeah, and I mean, look, because I've been kind of going on about the problems that Evanston has, but like I love Evanston. I absolutely love Evanston. I've
the best city to live in.
No, it's a great city, and I've been blessed enough where I've had the opportunities to travel in Europe, go see other states, go to other cities around the country, and at the end of the day, I want to raise a family in Evanston. And that's pretty substantial coming from somebody who's 20 years old, who is, you know, people may think is just figuring out their life. I'm already set on wanting to live here because of how inclusive people are, how close-knit of a community it is. Throughout my time at the high school, I could go to anyone in the community and ask for help or ask to talk to them about an issue that I face, and they would be there to listen to me and try to help me as best as they could. And that's just something that I haven't seen to that level in anywhere else that I've visited or lived in. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And all the changes that I mentioned earlier when it comes to policing, reform when it comes to beach tokens, all of those will put, yes, all of those will put Evanston on the right path and creating a more equitable community for all. But also, we need to make sure our youth are prepared for the world after they leave Evanston Township High School, and whether that's going on to post-secondary education or joining the workforce, the armed forces. So I pledged in the beginning of my campaign to create a robust internship program in the mayor's office when becoming mayor. And this would enable students to gain necessary work experience and learn more about local politics and civil engagement. And my hope is that these internship opportunities would expand to other alderman offices where students can do research and outreach for the aldermen and receive core workplace skills. And I mean, being a political science major, I would have loved to have something like that in place and, you know, be a part of that. And coming into college with something that's already on your resume, you already stand out so much more than other candidates. So it's giving our students, our children, a leg up compared to other cities as well. And it's also important that we look at our fiscal responsibilities as a result of COVID. And businesses have been forced to shut down, and residents are suffering. So we need to find ways to alleviate that suffering. And obviously the city government is limited in its capacity to do things because of money and federal and state oversight. But as a public servant, and the rest of the city council being public servants, we need to do what's necessary to help working residents here. And by working with the city council, the city manager, and local businesses, we can create a comprehensive plan to protect businesses that are currently in Evanston and bring new businesses to Evanston to fill those vacancies that were left by businesses that sadly had to shut down. And overall, this will help residents out because it'll be a boost to the economy overall in Evanston. We also need to look at environmental stability here in Evanston. Now we have the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, otherwise known as CARP, that was implemented in 2018. However, there has been little actually implementation of the plan. And I believe that climate change must take place on a national level. But until that happens, because of the current administration, we need to do our part as a community. So there's also the environmental justice aspect of it that combines with the racial justice. For example, I've held conversations with members of the Fifth Ward when I'm going out and petitioning, and they have addressed some of the issues that come with the trash processing plant on Church Street that's right by Mason Park, and some of the potential health risks that can come with having that so close to their neighborhood. So it's important that we address these issues the residents face. And as mayor of Evanston, it would be my job to be aware of these issues by talking directly to community members with those weekly and monthly town hall meetings that I mentioned earlier. And so I believe that all of these initiatives combined will create an Evanston that is fair and will move it into a brighter future overall.
Well, I appreciate your ideas, your vision, Sebastian. So what's next in this process?
So right now we are just in the signature phase and petitioning stage. It's obviously a little more difficult with COVID and individuals not want to leaving their home, and we appreciate all those who took the time to come out to events and open their doors to us, because we know they take a risk when they do that. But right now we're in that phase of garnering those petition signatures. And once we gain those necessary signatures that we need to get on the ballot, we can move to start meeting with groups to create advocacy groups in and around Evanston to create meaningful legislation that we can give to the city council and be like, look, we have this all drawn up, ready to go. This is now up to you to come and pass this, and we can create a better Evanston overall that is more prepared for the future. So that's where we are right now.
Okay. And do you know, like I asked this, I said, so who else is running? So he told me Sebastian Nalls. So I'm asking you, who else is running? To the best of my knowledge, I do not know if anybody else has publicly announced. So right now I would just assume that it's Daniel Biss and I that are in the race. I know Mayor Haggerty currently hasn't decided whether or not he wants to announce, but I look forward to any more competition that may come, because I think that's an important part of our democracy, is having the most amount of people that we can possibly have on the ballot, so that competing ideas can exist. And then ultimately, when that mayor is chosen, we can go, hey, you know, your idea was really great. Let's bring that to the table and let's implement it. Just because I'm your opponent on a political stage doesn't mean that we can't work together in the end of the day to create an Evanston that's better overall. Well, Sebastian, you know, regardless of what happens, I think you have a bright future, and I would feel good knowing that you're either working with the mayor or working with our city some kind of way, or as, you know, I would just feel good because you've got vision, and you've got fire. So, and I appreciate your perspective on everything. So,
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, keep us posted, and I'm sure we'll have you back as the race continues and you all get on the ballot. And I'm sure you're going to hear more from the community, things that they want to see change. So we definitely got to have you back and hear, you know, if any of your vision has changed after, you know, really getting out there in the community and hearing from them. But thank you so much for your time today, Sebastian. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I look forward to any other conversations we're going to have in the future.
Yes, yes. All right. This has been Malika, Evanston Live TV, and that was Sebastian Nalls.